The intake terminal glowed purple. Coordinator Jarrell stared at the screen, his secondary eyes refusing to focus while his primary pair insisted the color could not exist. In 20 cycles of processing applicants for the Galactic Cultural Exchange Program, he had reviewed 47,000 files. Green meant approved. Yellow meant delayed. Red meant denied. Purple was not a status code in the system. Purple was not a color the terminal could produce. Purple meant the algorithm itself had encountered something it could not categorize. His claws tightened against the edge of the console. The screen flickered once, twice, three times, red. Red, then settled back into that impossible shade. Data scrolled across the display in fragments appearing and disappearing, as if the system were arguing with itself about what information to show. Species human. That part was clear enough. Combat aptitude tier 9. Jarrell's scales went cold. Tier 9 was reserved for apex predators. War breed species. Beings whose evolutionary path had carved them into weapons before civilization tempered the blade. Threat classification alpha predator. Assigned in cohort group 12. Basic civilian self-defense orientation. The contradiction hit like a solar flare. Group 12 was where they sent the botanists, the archivists, the floral arrangers who fainted when doors closed too loudly, beings who had never considered violence beyond abstract theory and wanted to keep it that way. Coordinator Jarrell, Tarina's voice cut through his paralysis. His assistant stood in the doorway, her neck frills shifting from their usual calm blue to concerned turquoise. Medical has flagged your vital signs. You have been motionless for 11 minutes and 17 seconds. They believe you may have entered stress-induced stasis. Jarrell gestured weakly toward the screen. His voice came out rougher than intended. Tell me what you see. Read it slowly. Tarina approached her steps careful. She leaned over his shoulder and he watched her scales shift color as the data registered. Curious green became shocked orange in the space of 3 heartbeats. Combat conditioning score? She read, her voice barely above a whisper. Off the measurement scale. Reaction speed 0.08 seconds. 98th percentile among known predator species. She paused, frills flattening against her neck. Bone density 312% predicted human average. Muscle fiber composition flagged as military-grade enhancement markers. Neural response latency rivals apex predators bred for war. Her voice cracked slightly on the next words. Assigned cohort basic orientation group 12. Jarrell pulled up the group roster with trembling claws. The faces stared back at him from the screen. Petals, the plebeian floral arranger, whose petals wilted to pale violet whenever someone raised their voice. The 3 Quillic siblings, Skip, Dash, and Flick, whose rabbit-like ears swiveled at every unexpected sound, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. The Matherian scholars, Orin and Nyx, a bonded pair, who came from a species that had evolved past physical conflict 15,000 years ago and never looked back. The average threat assessment for Group 12 was 0.3 on a scale of 10. Harmless, gentle. Beings who needed to learn how to hold a training rod without apologizing to it. And somewhere in that group, if the terminal was correct, they had just enrolled something rated 9.0. How? Tarina breathed. How did this happen? Jarrell forced his analytical mind to engage, pushing past the alarm. He pulled up the intake algorithm's decision tree, following the logic path that had led to this catastrophic classification. The answer revealed itself in painful simplicity. Current occupation, humanitarian medical worker. Aid volunteer, disaster relief specialist. Keywords flagging humanitarian, medical, aid, volunteer, relief. Algorithmic response, low threat civilian. Support species classification. Assigned to basic orientation cohort. The system only scans the most recent employment entry, Jarrell said, his voice hollow. It found the keywords it was looking for and stopped there. Humanitarian work, medical aid. It never looked deeper into the file. But the biometric data was flagged for review, which is why the terminal turned purple. The algorithm found a contradiction it could not resolve. He scrolled down past the civilian credentials, past the medical certifications and diplomatic clearances, down to the section labeled Employment History. Chronological. His blood went colder still. Previous occupation, Earth Alliance Special Operations, Master Sergeant, 12 years active service, specialization, hostile environment, extraction, combat medicine, close quarters, urban warfare. 3 commendations for valor. Psychological evaluation notes. Exceptional stress management, high empathy markers, recommended for civilian transition programs. Retirement reason, voluntary separation, pursuing humanitarian work. We just enrolled an apex predator into flower arranging lessons, Tarina whispered. Jarell looked at the final piece of data at the bottom of the intake form. Applicant behavioral notes from screening interview. Exceptionally polite and apologetic for any inconvenience caused during processing. Patient, calm, expressed genuine enthusiasm for learning basic safety protocols. A Tier 9 predator had apologized for making them wait. Group 12 begins their first session in 38 minutes. Tarina said, her frills now cycling through distress colors. Instructor Granite will be teaching them how to safely hold a training rod without dropping it. Jarell stood, his tail sweeping the floor in agitation. Every instinct screamed to intervene immediately. Pull the human, reassign her, prevent whatever disaster was about to unfold. But another part of his mind, the part that had survived 2 decades in bureaucracy by understanding the value of observation, held him back. We watch, he decided. No intervention yet. If this is a calibration error in our biometric scanners, it will reveal itself quickly. If it is not, he exhaled slowly, then we document everything and pray nothing startles her. 36 minutes later, Jarell stood in the observation deck overlooking Training Hall 5. His stomach had developed a knot that felt permanent. Below, 18 recruits from across the galaxy gathered in nervous clusters. The hall was vast, designed to accommodate large-scale combat drills, but today it felt cavernous. Padded mats covered the floor. Equipment racks lined the walls, filled with training implements that could not cause real harm. Soft lighting eliminated harsh shadows. Everything about the space was engineered to feel safe, non-threatening, designed for beings who needed to overcome fear before they could learn anything else. Petals stood near the far wall, his petal-framed head trembling despite the absence of wind. His bioluminescent patterns flickered between nervous yellow and frightened purple. The plebeian was so anxious he was practically vibrating at a frequency Jarell could detect from the observation deck. The Quillix trio had pressed themselves together into a single furry mass, 3 sets of ears, swiveling independently, tracking every echo in the vast space. Their small frames, barely 1 meter tall, made them look even more vulnerable against the scale of the hall. Orrin and Nyx clutched their datapads like shields, whispering to each other in the melodic language of the Motherians, scholar species. They approached violence the way philosophers approach death, as an interesting theoretical concept best studied from a very safe distance. And then there was the human. She stood slightly apart from the others, not isolated, but occupying her own space with a quality of presence Jarell struggled to define. Her name tag read Vex K. Earth, height average for her species, perhaps 1.7 meters, brown skin, dark hair pulled back in a severe style that somehow looked both practical and precise. The standard gray training uniform hung on her frame differently than it did on the others. On them, it looked like exercise clothing. On her, it looked tactical. She was smiling, small, gentle, friendly. It made Jarell's scales itch. Her hands were clasped loosely behind her back, her weight distributed evenly on both feet. Her eyes tracked the room in a pattern he recognized from security. Footage, corners, first exits, second other occupants, third potential obstacles last. She had mapped every relevant detail of the space in less than 20 seconds and now stood in perfect stillness, waiting. Not the stillness of meditation, the stillness of a mechanism at rest, ready to activate. The hall doors opened with a thunderous clang that echoed off the high ceiling. Instructor Granite entered. At 3 meters tall, his Gorlan frame filled the doorway like a moving mountain. Stone-like hide, gray and scarred from decades of service, caught the light in ways that emphasized every old wound. His eyes, small for his size but sharp, swept across the gathered recruits with the assessment of someone who had seen thousands of beginners and knew exactly how this would go. Petals wilted visibly, petals curling inward. 2 of the Quillix made a small squeaking sound. Orrin dropped his datapad. Several other recruits took involuntary steps backward. The human's eyes brightened with interest, not fear, not even tension. Interest. Her posture shifted slightly. Jarell saw it from above, a micro-adjustment that centered her weight even more perfectly, made her stance marginally more stable. She had evaluated Granite's size and strength and responded not with alarm, but with readiness. "Welcome," Granite said, his voice a deep rumble that carried through the hall without effort, to combat fundamentals, basic orientation. He paced along the front of the group, each footstep a percussive statement. Fear rippled through the recruits like wind through grass. "Most of you," Granite continued, "have never considered violence beyond theory. You come from species who evolved past physical conflict or never developed it in the first place. You are support personnel, medical staff, cultural liaisons, beings who make the galaxy function through cooperation and peace. He stopped, turning to face them fully. That ends here. The words hung in the air like a threat. Petals made a sound halfway between a whimper and a sigh. The Quillix pressed even closer together. You will learn awareness, Granite said. You will learn to recognize danger before it becomes critical. You will learn basic defensive postures. And by the end of this course, you will be capable of holding a training implement without injuring yourselves or others. The human was nodding slightly, not nervously, listening, like a student at a lecture she genuinely respected. Granite moved to the equipment rack and lifted a padded training rod. It was simple, 1.5 meters of lightweight composite wrapped in impact-dampening foam. Colored bright yellow so it could never be mistaken for a real weapon. Balanced for beings with limited upper body strength. This, he held it up, is not a weapon. It is a training aid. Safe, balanced, simple. You will learn to hold it properly. You will not swing it. You will not spar. You will not improvise. Understood. Weak affirmatives scattered through the group, some verbal, some gestural, all hesitant. Retrieve your equipment. Single file. The line formed with painful slowness. Anxiety governed every movement. One Quillix held the rod backward, gripping the wrong end. Another recruit, a 6-limbed being from a low-gravity world, couldn't figure out which appendages to use. Petals dropped his rod twice and apologized to it both times. The human waited at the back of the line, patient. When her turn came, she stepped forward with that same economical movement, no wasted energy, no unnecessary motion. Granite extended the rod. Their eyes met. Something passed between them in that moment. Jarrell saw it, even from the observation deck, a flash of recognition, predator acknowledging predator. Granite's expression did not change, but his body language shifted infinitesimally. Alert. Assessing. The human Kira Vex the file had named her accepted the rod. Her grip was perfect. Not practiced. Not careful. Instinctive. Thumb alignment precise along the shaft. Pressure distributed optimally to maintain control without tension. Balance point centered without any need for adjustment. Her hands knew exactly where to go before her conscious mind registered the object. This was muscle memory. This was someone who had held weapons so many times that the correct grip had become automatic, encoded at a level below thought. Thank you, instructor, she said. Her voice was warm, genuine. Granite said nothing, but his eyes never left her as she moved to join the others. From the observation deck, Jarrell felt his blood run cold. This was no calibration error. This was no glitch in the biometric scanners. Everything the terminal had flagged was accurate. They had just handed a combat implement to someone whose body knew exactly what to do with it, and she was standing in a room full of beings who could barely hold the same object without trembling. Granite moved to the center of the hall and demonstrated the basic stance. Feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly flexed, training rod angled across the torso at 45 degrees, positioned for defense. It was the most fundamental posture in galactic combat doctrine, designed specifically for beings who had never needed to defend themselves and might never need to again. Copy this position, Granite instructed. Chaos, gentle, well-meaning chaos. One Quillix held the rod with all 4 paws, creating a tangle of limbs that locked him in place. Another recruit gripped it so tightly his forelimbs shook with strain. Petals somehow managed to get the rod wedged between his petals and had to be helped free, apologizing profusely to everyone nearby. Kira Vex did not copy the stance. She settled into it. The distinction was subtle but absolute. While others tried to remember the positions and force their bodies into unfamiliar shapes, she allowed her body to find its own equilibrium. Weight distributed, center of gravity lowered. Micro-adjustments rippled through her posture, ankles, knees, hips, spine, each part of the system calibrating itself automatically. No stiffness, no hesitation, no thought. She was already there before the others had started moving. Granite began moving through the line, offering corrections. Loosen your grip. You are not strangling prey. This is a defensive tool, not a climbing apparatus. He reached the Quillix, who had tangled himself. Feet wider. At this width, you will topple at the first breeze. He approached Petals. Stop apologizing to the equipment. It has no feelings and does not judge you. Then he reached Kira. He stopped. 5 heartbeats of silence, just watching her. You, Granite said, his voice neutral in a way that suggested great control. Human. Where did you learn to hold a combat implement? Kira's head tilted slightly, a gesture that read as someone considering how much honesty was appropriate. I've worked in unstable regions, she replied, her tone even and polite. Basic self-defense training was required for humanitarian personnel in high-risk zones. Basic. Granite repeated the word as if testing its weight and finding it insufficient. Yes, instructor. Granite leaned closer, his rocky face descending until it was mere inches from hers. This close to the size difference became almost comical. He could have crushed her with one hand. But she did not flinch, did not step back, met his gaze with calm focus. Your stance is correct, Granite said quietly. Your grip pressure is optimal. Your balance is centered for immediate movement in any direction. Your weight distribution anticipates engagement from multiple vectors. He straightened slowly. Basic training does not produce this. Several recruits glanced nervously between them. The tension in the hall had shifted, become sharper. Kira's smile softened into something apologetic. My instructors were very thorough. They prioritized safety and correct form. I was fortunate to train with experienced personnel. It was a perfect non-answer. Polite, deferential, completely uninformative. Granite held her gaze for 3 more seconds, then moved on. But Jarrell noticed he kept glancing back at her throughout the session, his attention returning like a compass needle to north. The lesson continued. Foot placement, guard transitions, controlled movement through basic positions. The civilians struggled through each element, learning through stumbles and gentle corrections. They were trying, genuinely trying. Kira flowed. She transitioned between positions without conscious thought. Every motion economical, purposeful. She anticipated balance shifts before they occurred and adjusted accordingly. Once, just once, she started to reach toward another recruit whose grip was dangerously incorrect, her hand moving in an automatic correction. Then she caught herself, froze mid-motion, pulled back, reminded herself that she was not here to teach. She was restraining herself. That realization settled in Jarrell's chest like a cold stone. This was not just skill. This was active suppression of capability. She was holding back, constantly fighting against training so deeply ingrained that it activated without permission. What happened when that restraint slipped? After 40 minutes, Granite called for a halt. One final exercise, he announced. Observational only. No participation required beyond maintaining your stance. The recruits stiffened, fear creeping back into their postures. I will approach each of you slowly, Granite explained. You will maintain your defensive position. You will not attack. You will not flee. This is a standard assessment of composure under pressure. Nothing more. He started with the Quillix trio. They lasted 4 seconds before their prey instincts overrode training and they scattered in 3 different directions. Granite noted this on his datapad without comment and moved to the next recruit. The pattern repeated. Some lasted longer than others. Orn backed away within 10 seconds, stammering apologies. Nix held position for nearly 30 seconds before his nerve broke. Petals fainted outright before Granite even reached him, his petals going completely white as he collapsed gently to the padded floor. Medical staff rushed in from the side doors. Kira's head turned toward the commotion, concern flickering briefly across her face. Not fear, not for herself. Assessment of injury, evaluation of needed response. Her eyes tracked the medical team's movements with the focus of someone who had performed triage in worse circumstances. Then Granite approached her. She did not move. He closed the distance in measured steps. 3 meters, 2 meters, 1 meter, half a meter. His presence radiated controlled aggression, the kind of energy honed through real combat and real consequences, designed to trigger primal fear responses in species across the evolutionary spectrum. Kira's breathing did not change. Her eyes tracked him with focused clarity, not with hostility, not with defiance, but with the calm attention of someone processing information and calculating appropriate responses. She was not bracing for impact. She was not preparing to flee. She was ready, for what Jor-El could not say. But ready. Granite stopped mere centimeters from her training rod, close enough that his shadow engulfed her completely. The size difference was absurd. He could break her without effort if this were real. Both of them knew it. Neither of them flinched. You are not afraid, Granite observed. His voice was quiet enough that Jor-El had to enhance the observation deck's audio to hear. I understand this is a training exercise, Kira replied, her tone measured. You have not indicated hostile intent. Therefore, fear is not an appropriate response. And if I had indicated hostile intent, her smile returned faint and unreadable, then I would reassess my response appropriately. The words were polite, professional. The implication beneath them was absolutely terrifying. She had already calculated exactly what she would do if this became a real threat. The scenarios were ready waiting. All she needed was the decision to act. Granite stared at her for 3 heartbeats. Then he stepped back. Dismissed. The recruits scattered in relief, most of them heading immediately for the exits. Kira carefully returned her training rod to the equipment rack, each movement deliberate and controlled. She nodded respectfully to Granite and walked toward the doors with smooth, economical steps that covered ground faster than they appeared to. Granite remained standing in the center of the empty hall. Then slowly he looked up directly at the observation deck, directly at Jarrell. He made a Gorland gesture with his massive hand, 3 fingers extended, 2 curled. In his species' military sign language, it translated roughly to, "We need to talk, now. This cannot wait." Jarrell's secondary eyes closed in resignation. He had known this moment was coming from the instant the terminal glowed purple. But knowing did not make it easier. Somewhere in the station, Kira Vex was walking back to her quarters, probably stopping to help someone carry equipment or asking polite questions about station layout. Being friendly, being kind, being everything her file said she was trying to become. And in 5 minutes, Jarrell would sit across from Instructor Granite and hear words he already knew were coming. That human is not a civilian. The question was not whether she was dangerous. The data had already answered that. The question was what they did about it. How they protected Group 12 from someone who could probably disarm Granite himself if pressed. How they protected Kira from a situation where her instincts might override her intentions. How they kept this from ending in disaster. The purple terminal screen haunted him, a classification the system could not resolve. A being who existed in the space between categories, neither civilian nor soldier, both protector and potential threat. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight brought only questions and the growing certainty that the Galactic Cultural Exchange Program had just encountered its most complicated applicant in 20 cycles. The observation deck lights dimmed as evening cycle approached. Below the training hall stood empty, waiting for tomorrow's session, waiting to see if restraint could hold or if something would finally push past the carefully maintained control, waiting for the moment when Kira Vex would have to choose who she truly was. The impossible classification. 5 minutes later, Jarrell sat across from Instructor Granite in an office that suddenly felt too small. The Gorland filled the chair designed for his species, but his presence seemed to exceed even those generous dimensions. His stone-gray hands rested flat on the desk, perfectly still. That stillness was worse than agitation. It meant he was exerting control. It meant the situation was serious enough that he needed control. That human, Granite said without preamble, is not a civilian. Tarina stood by the door, her frills flickering through a nervous spectrum of yellows and oranges. She had witnessed the training session from a different angle, seen things Jarrell might have missed. Her silence confirmed she agreed with Granite's assessment. Jarrell pulled up Kira Vex's file on the desk display, the data glowing between them like evidence at a trial. Her documentation is complete. He began, knowing the argument was hollow even as he made it. Medical certifications, humanitarian credentials, diplomatic clearances. She has authorization from the Earth Alliance Cultural Exchange Bureau. Everything is in order. Everything. Granite interrupted, his voice a low rumble, except the being herself. He leaned forward. The desk creaked. I have trained soldiers for 3 decades, 27,000 recruits from 143 species. I know the difference between natural athletic ability and combat conditioning. That woman has extensive close quarters training. Not theoretical, not academic, operational. How can you be certain? Jarrell asked, though he already knew. Needed to hear it said aloud. Needed the words to make it real. Granite's eyes narrowed. Movement economy. Every action serves a purpose. No wasted energy. When she walked to the equipment rack, she maintained awareness of everyone in the room. When she held the training rod, her body automatically positioned it for optimal strike angles while appearing defensive. When I approached her, she assessed my center of gravity, reach advantage, and vulnerable points. In less than a second, I watched her eyes. He paused. Natural talent does not eliminate fear response. Training does. Someone has drilled that reaction pattern into her through thousands of repetitions until it became automatic. That level of conditioning only comes from military close combat specialization. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Tarina spoke from her position by the door, her voice quiet. She stopped herself from correcting other recruits 3 times during the session. Started to reach out, caught herself, pulled back, as if teaching was an ingrained reflex too. Jarrell scrolled through the file again, looking for what he had missed. Current occupation glowed at the top: humanitarian medical worker, disaster relief specialist, aid volunteer. The keywords that had triggered the civilian classification. The algorithm had done exactly what it was programmed to do. It had scanned the most recent entry and made its determination. It had never looked deeper. His claw moved down the display past the certifications and clearances into the section labeled Employment History, Chronological Sequence. And there, buried beneath the humanitarian work, beneath the medical credentials, the truth revealed itself in clinical language. Earth Alliance Special Operations. Master Sergeant Kira Vex, age 34 standard years. Service period, 12 standard years, 4 months, 17 days. Specialization, hostile environment, extraction, combat medicine, urban warfare operations. Commendations. Silver Star Operation details classified 3 Purple Hearts for injuries sustained in combat. Humanitarian Service Medal, post-service. Notable operations. 7 entries, all marked, classified, all redacted. Psychological evaluation, final entry before discharge. Subject demonstrates exceptional stress management capability. High empathy markers despite extensive combat exposure. Shows genuine desire for civilian transition. Recommended for humanitarian aid programs. Note: subject's technical combat proficiency remains at peak operational level. Emotional processing of combat trauma ongoing. Monitor for signs of difficulty adjusting to non-combat environments. Current status: retired honorable discharge. Clearance level maintained but inactive. Cultural exchange participant. Voluntary enrollment in basic civilian safety training. Retirement reasons stated by subject: I want to learn how to exist in places where things don't explode. Jarrell's blood went cold as the full picture assembled itself. They had not simply misclassified a soldier. They had placed someone who had spent 12 years in the galaxy's most intense combat situations into a class designed for beings who had never experienced violence of any kind. Someone who was trying to escape war, surrounded by those who had never known it. What do we do? Tarina asked. Granite's answer was immediate. Immediate reassignment, advanced combat cohort, before someone startles her and we discover whether her restraint has limits. And if we are wrong, Jarrell challenged, needing to explore every angle. If she is genuinely transitioning to civilian life, if she came here specifically because she wants to be treated as a non-combatant, then we are doing her a kindness by placing her with others who can match her capability level. Granite's expression hardened. But if we are right and something triggers an instinctive combat response while she is surrounded by civilians who cannot defend themselves? He let the implication hang. I have seen trained fighters accidentally injure non-combatants during stress responses. The guilt destroys them. They never recover, and the institution that failed to prevent it never recovers either. Jarrell nodded, slowly acknowledging the weight of the decision. I will contact the Earth Alliance liaison immediately. The response arrived in 8 minutes and 42 seconds. Too fast. They had been expecting this inquiry. The message was brief: classification error acknowledged. Full personnel dossier attached per emergency protocol. Handle with discretion. Subject is aware file may be accessed if security concerns arise. Direct communication with subject recommended before final decision. The attachment loaded. Jarrell opened it with a sense of inevitability, as if reading a story whose ending he already knew, but needed to witness anyway. Sergeant Kira Vex stared out from the personnel photo. Younger, harder, eyes that had seen things the current version tried to hide behind smiles. She wore full combat gear in the image: tactical armor, marked with scars, helmet maglock to her belt pulse rifle, held with casual competence across her chest. Behind her, the burned-out shell of a building smoke rising into an alien sky. The dossier spanned 47 pages. Combat deployments, mission briefs with most details redacted, medical reports documenting injuries that should have been career-ending, but were not, psychological evaluations tracking someone trying to maintain humanity while operating in environments designed to strip it away. One section caught his attention. Mission reports 7 months before her retirement. Hostage rescue operation, medical clinic in contested territory. 27 civilian hostages, including 12 juveniles. Armed militant occupation is subjects using hostages as shields. Standard extraction protocol authorized lethal force. Subject Vex volunteered for point position on medical extraction team. During extraction, encountered armed hostile while carrying wounded juvenile to evacuation point. Subject chose verbal de-escalation over engagement protocol. Successfully talked hostile into lowering weapon. Juvenile survived. Hostile subject was 19 standard years old, conscripted involuntarily. Debriefing note from commanding officer. Sergeant Vex's decision to de-escalate rather than engage was tactically questionable and placed the mission at risk. However, outcome was successful. Subject explained she could have neutralized the threat in approximately zero point 0.8 seconds, but assessed the hostile as frightened conscript rather than committed combatant. States she didn't want to be the kind of soldier who kills terrified children. Recommends psychological evaluation. Psychological evaluation attached subject displays high empathy levels inconsistent with combat specialization profile. Shows signs of ethical conflict regarding use of lethal force. States she is tired of making split-second decisions about who lives and dies. Recommended for non-combat support role or retirement with transition support. Subject has requested retirement and enrollment in humanitarian aid training programs. Recommend approval. Subject has given enough. The final entry was her discharge interview. One line stood out: I spent 12 years being the solution when everything went wrong. I want to learn how to exist in places where things go right. Jarrell closed the file. His hands were shaking slightly. She is exactly what the biometrics said she was, and exactly what her current credentials say she is, both simultaneously. That is not possible, Tarina said. No. Granite rumbled. It is rare, but possible. I have met 2 others like her in my service. Warriors who retain the capability but lose the desire. They are the most dangerous kind, not because of what they will do, because of what they might do and the burden of restraining it. The emergency meeting convened at first light cycle. That alone communicated the severity. Director Prism did not call emergency sessions for simple administrative errors. The conference chamber was crystalline Prism's own species, having designed it centuries ago. Light refracted through the director's faceted body, creating patterns on the walls that shifted with her emotional state, currently sharp, restless, indicating irritation. Granite occupied the seat to her right, arms, folded expression, carved from stone. To her left sat 3 representatives from the Earth Alliance Diplomatic Corps. Ambassador Webb looked like someone who had made this kind of damage control visit before and was tired of it. His 2 aides wore expressions carefully neutral, professional. Jarrell recognized the look. They were here to manage fallout. Tarina sat beside Jarrell, recording everything. Required protocol for emergency sessions. At the far end of the table sat Kira Vex. She wore civilian clothing, simple, functional, hands folded neatly on the table in front of her, posture relaxed but attentive, not restrained, not guarded, not treated as a threat, but everyone's body language oriented around her as if she were the most dangerous element in the room. Because she was. Let me summarize, Director Rism began, her voice harmonizing with controlled displeasure. Each word refracted through her crystalline structure, giving it an edge. Sergeant Vex submitted accurate documentation. Her background check was completed according to protocol. Yet she was assigned to a civilian training cohort demonstrably unsuitable for her capability level. She turned her faceted gaze to Jarrell. Coordinator, explain how this occurred. Jarrell kept his voice steady. The intake algorithm prioritizes current occupation keywords. Humanitarian medical aid worker, disaster relief. These triggered automatic classification as low-threat civilian support personnel. Military service was listed in the file but not flagged because it appears under historical employment rather than current status. The system is designed to assess present threat level, not past capability. The algorithm, Prism repeated slowly, ignored a section specifically labeled prior military service. The silence pressed down like atmospheric weight. Ambassador Webb cleared his throat. Director, if I may, Earth Alliance personnel files follow our standardized format. Military service is listed chronologically under employment history. We were not aware your intake system scanned only the most recent entry. His voice carried the weariness of someone explaining a preventable tragedy. We have identified this as a potential issue with file format compatibility. We have sent multiple requests to update the scanning protocols to prevent exactly this situation. Granite leaned forward, his bulk making the crystalline table look fragile. Understandable does not mean acceptable. You placed a Tier 9 predator among beings who panic when I raise my voice. Group 12 has a plebeian who faints at unexpected door closures. 3 Quilix whose species' entire evolutionary advantage is running from danger. Scholar species who have not experienced physical violence in their recorded history. He looked directly at Kira. No disrespect intended to your service, Sergeant, but you are dangerous, professionally dangerous, and my civilians are not equipped to be in proximity to professional danger. Kira raised one hand slightly. The gesture was careful, non-threatening. May I speak, the director? Prism inclined her faceted head. Permission granted. I apologize for the confusion, Kira said. Her voice was steady, measured. I assumed the program began with baseline training for all participants, regardless of background. Many organizations structure it that way. Everyone starts at the foundation to ensure proper technique before advancing. You thought, Granite said, his tone somewhere between incredulous and impressed, we would teach a combat veteran how to hold a stick. Yes, instructor, consistency prevents bad habits. I have seen advanced personnel develop flawed fundamentals because they skipped basic training. I wanted to learn correctly from the beginning. She paused. I did not intend to cause problems. If my presence is disruptive, I will withdraw. You are still dangerous, Granite stated flatly. I am capable, Kira corrected, and something in her voice sharpened. There is a difference. Dangerous implies intent to harm. Capable means I have skills. What I do with those skills is a choice. Every single day I choose not to be dangerous. Ambassador Webb nodded. Director Sergeant Vex specifically requested this program because she is transitioning away from combat roles. She wants to learn how to apply her skills in civilian contexts. De-escalation, protection without violence, situational awareness for safety rather than engagement. Noble goals, Prism said. But Instructor Granite raises a valid concern. What happens when instinct overrides intention? When a loud noise triggers combat response, when someone stumbles into her during a drill and her body reacts before her mind registers it as harmless? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Kira's expression remained calm, but Jarrell saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, not of them, of herself, of the possibility Prism had just articulated. I have considered that, Kira said quietly. It is why I enrolled in basic training rather than advanced courses. To recalibrate my threat assessment in low-stress environments, to practice being around people who are not in danger, to retrain my automatic responses. She met Prism's gaze. I am not asking to be treated as harmless. I am asking for the opportunity to prove I can choose restraint. Director Prism activated the holographic projector. A busy station marketplace materialized above the table, small figures moving through commercial districts. Scenario, she said. You are walking through this area. A cargo container falls from an overhead loader. Loud noise. Sudden movement behind you. Unexpected. What do? Kira did not hesitate. Step laterally out of the fall path while turning toward the sound. Assess for injuries. Check for secondary hazards. Additional falling cargo, structural damage, chemical leaks. If someone is hurt, provide immediate medical assistance. If multiple casualties, perform triage. Call for emergency services. You do not assume attack, Prism asked. No, because it is not an attack. It is an accident. Different circumstances require different responses. The scene shifted. Two beings shouting at each other in the marketplace, physical shoving beginning. This scenario. Create distance, Kira said. Contact station security. Monitor for escalation to serious harm. Do not intervene unless someone is in immediate danger of significant injury. If intervention becomes necessary, verbal commands first. Attempt to separate combatants without force. Physical contact only if verbal de-escalation fails and injury is imminent. And if someone is in immediate danger, Granite asked. Kira's expression hardened slightly. Not aggression, focus. Minimum necessary force to prevent harm, verbal warning, physical interposition if possible. Joint locks or controlled restraint if required. Proportional response. No strikes unless absolutely necessary to prevent serious injury or death. Controlled application. Constant reassessment. The scenarios dissolved. Silence filled the conference chamber. She answers instantly, Prism observed. No deliberation. These are reflexive responses. Because I have trained for emergency situations, Kira replied. Hesitation costs lives, but training can be for protection instead of combat. The speed is the same. The intent is different. Tarina spoke from her position at the side of the table, her frills glowing thoughtful blue. May I offer a perspective? Prism gestured permission. Group 12 is terrified of conflict, Tarina said. They associate strength with harm, capability with cruelty. They fear their own potential for violence because they have been taught that violence is always wrong. She looked at Kira. But Sergeant Vex demonstrates something they have never seen. Control, compassion paired with capability, strength used for protection rather than harm. She turned to Prism. What if she is not the problem? What if she is exactly what they need? Not someone who will fight for them. Someone who will teach them they do not have to be helpless to be good. Granite considered this a low rumble in his chest that might have been thoughtful agreement. Petals nearly fainted again yesterday during the intimidation drill. But when he came to consciousness, the first thing he asked was whether the human remained calm. Tarina told him yes. He said it helped him feel less ashamed of his fear. Kira's expression softened slightly, though she said nothing. Director Prism rotated slowly, light patterns shifting across the walls. Sergeant Vex, would you accept a modified placement peer mentor role? You would remain in Group 12, but with explicit teaching authority. Enhanced oversight from Instructor Granite. Regular evaluations. Immediate reporting requirement if you experience any difficulty maintaining control. Yes, Kira's answer came without hesitation. That is far more useful than pretending ignorance. I would rather help them learn to feel safe than waste everyone's time performing incompetence. A ripple of surprised amusement moved through the room. The woman was blunt when it mattered. Conditions, Prism continued. Instructor Granite retains final authority over all training activities. You defer to his judgment. If at any point your instincts begin to override your conscious control, you withdraw immediately and report to medical for evaluation. You will meet with station counseling services twice per week to discuss your transition adjustment. Any violation of these terms results in immediate removal from the program. I understand and accept, Kira said, and I appreciate the trust this represents. I will not betray it. The meeting adjourned. As they walked toward the transit corridor, Jarrell fell into step beside Kira. Tarina walked slightly ahead, giving them a semblance of privacy. Sergeant Vex, Jarrell said quietly, thank you for your patience with this process. I understand it must be frustrating to have your intentions questioned. I understand caution, Kira replied. I would rather be questioned than ignored. Ignored means someone did not care enough to look closely. Questioned means someone cares about keeping people safe. She glanced at him. I respect that. They walked in silence for a few moments. Then Jarrell asked the question that had been building since he first saw her file. May I ask why you chose this program specifically? You could have enrolled in advanced civilian defense training, courses designed for beings with your background. Why start at the beginning with Group 12? Kira stopped walking, looked out a viewport at the stars beyond the station. Her reflection in the transparent aluminum showed someone tired in ways that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Because I spent 12 years being the solution when things went wrong, she said softly. Every crisis, every disaster, every situation falling apart, I was the person they sent in to make it stop, to extract the hostages, to secure the area, to ensure the mission succeeded no matter what it cost. She paused. I was good at it, very good. That is what frightened me most, how good I became at making those decisions, who lives, who dies, who matters more. Split-second calculations that became automatic. She turned to face him. I do not want to be that person anymore. I want to learn how to exist in places where people do not need saving, where the scared person with a gun can just be a scared person and I can help them without having to calculate their threat value, where I can use my skills to make people feel safe instead of making them safer by eliminating dangers. Her voice dropped even quieter. I want to learn how to be gentle again. Group 12 seemed like a good place to start. The answer settled into Jarrell's chest like a weight. This was not a warrior pretending to be civilian. This was someone genuinely trying to transform fighting against a decade of conditioning that had carved her into something she no longer wanted to be. Thank you for explaining, he said. I hope we can help you find what you are looking for. Kira smiled small and genuine. You already have. You gave me 18 terrified civilians who need someone to believe they can be brave. That is exactly what I need. She boarded the transit pod and Jarrell watched it carry her toward the residential sectors. Tarina moved beside him, frills cycling through contemplative colors. She frightens me, Tarina said, but I think I like her. Yes, Jarrell agreed. That seems to be the universal response. Tomorrow would bring week 1 of the modified training program. Kira Vex would begin teaching beings who had never known violence how to feel safe in their own bodies, how to hold training implements without fear, how to move through the world with confidence instead of terror. And somewhere in that process, perhaps she would teach herself that strength did not always lead to harm, that capability could coexist with kindness, that she could carry the skills of war into peacetime and use them to build rather than destroy. Perhaps, the word perhaps, was doing significant work in that hope, because the question remained unanswered. What happened when something went wrong? when a drill turned dangerous, when instinct and intention collided. Jarrell did not know, could not know. He could only watch and hope and keep the emergency medical team on standby, just in case restraint had limits after all. The impossible classification week. One began with Petals apologizing to a training rod. "I am sorry," and the plebeian whispered to the inanimate object after dropping it for the third time. His petals flickered through nervous purples and anxious yellows, bioluminescent patterns broadcasting his distress to everyone in the hall. "I did not mean to. I will try harder. Please forgive me." Kira approached slowly, her footsteps deliberate enough to announce her presence without startling. She had learned this in the first 2 days. Sudden movement near prey species triggered panic responses that could take 20 minutes to calm. Everything had to be telegraphed, predictable, safe. She knelt to his level. Plebeian stood at 1.2 meters, which meant getting down low to meet his eyes without looming. "Hey," she said softly, "can I show you something?" Petals nodded, petals curling inward protectively. Kira picked up the training rod. "This is foam and composite. Lightweight synthetic. It weighs less than a liter of water. It cannot hurt you, and you cannot hurt it." She held it out. "It has no feelings. It does not judge you when you drop it. It exists only to help you learn." "But I keep failing." "You keep practicing," Kira corrected gently. "Failure means you tried and stopped. Practice means you tried and continue. Which are you doing?" Petals considered this. His petals shifted toward thoughtful amber. "Continuing. Then you have not failed. You are learning." She adjusted her grip on the rod, showing him the positioning. "The grip does not need to be tight. Think of holding a flower stem. Firm enough to guide it, gentle enough not to crush it. Your species works with living things. You understand delicate control." She placed the rod in his appendages, guiding the position with careful touches. "There. Feel that, not strangling, not dropping, just holding." Petals held the rod. His petals still trembled slightly, but the trembling was less. Progress measured in millimeters, but progress nonetheless. "Now," Kira said, "the worst thing that happens if you drop this is it makes a soft sound when it hits the mat. That is all. The universe does not end. You try again." She stood, stepped back, gave him space. 10 seconds. Just hold it for 10 seconds. Do not think about anything else. Petals focused. His petals began their nervous flicker, then steadied. 5 seconds. 7. 10. "Perfect," Kira said. The petals glowed warm gold, plebeian expression of joy. It was the first time Jarrell had seen that color from petals in 3 weeks of training. From his position in the observation deck, Jarrell made a note in his log. Subject Vex demonstrates exceptional patience with low-confidence species. Approach is non-threatening, encouraging. Results positive. Instructor Granite stood beside him, arms crossed, watching. He said nothing but nodded once. Approval grudging, but genuine. The Quillix trio presented a different challenge. Skip, Dash, and Flick stood at the base of the obstacle course, ears flat against their heads in distress. At 0.9 meters tall, the wall ahead looked like a cliff face. Designed for larger speeds, it would be difficult for them even with perfect technique. With their current panic levels, it was impossible. "We cannot do this," Skip said, his voice small. "We are too small. The course was not made for us." "We should withdraw," Dash added. "This is not meant for our species." Flick simply stared at the wall, whiskers trembling. Kira approached from the side, never from behind, never blocking exits. Prey species needed to know they could run. Taking away that option made them focus on fear instead of learning. "You are right," she said. They looked at her in surprise. "This course was not designed for you," Kira continued. "It was designed for Instructor Granite's species. Beings 3 times your height with proportional strength and reach advantages." She gestured at the wall. "For them, this is challenging. For you, in the same way, it would be impossible." Their ears drooped further. "So do not do it the same way," Kira said. "You are not too small. You are compact. That is a completely different thing." She pointed to a narrow gap between 2 obstacles. "See that space? Granite cannot fit through there. He has to go around. You can go straight through. That is not a disadvantage. That is a shortcut." She moved to a section with multiple small handholds. "These grips uncomfortable for large hands. Perfect for yours. What looks difficult to bigger species is designed for you." Skip's ears perked up slightly. "We can use the small spaces, umbile." "You can fly through them," Kira said. "They turn tight corners faster than the larger beings. They change direction in half a meter. They can slip through gaps that would stop someone my size. She smiled. The course is not harder for you. It is just different. And different means you have advantages they do not. She demonstrated the approach, moving through the course at human scale, showing where her size created limitations, where she had to climb detour work around obstacles. Now watch where you have advantages. She guided Skip to the narrow passage. He slipped through, emerging on the other side with a surprise squeak, then did it again faster. Then a third time, adding a directional change that made Dash and Flick chittering with excitement. Not too small, Kira said. Compact, agile, fast. Those are strengths. By the end of the session, all three Quillicks were navigating sections of the course with growing confidence. Not perfect, not fast, but moving forward instead of frozen in fear. Their perception had shifted. Small was not weakness. It was a different kind of strength. Week 2 brought the incident. Instructor Granite was demonstrating various training implements, explaining their purposes and proper handling. The equipment rack held 24 items, rods of different weights, padded shields, practice blades with dulled edges, defensive tools. He reached for a demonstration shield. His massive hand caught the edge of a support strut. The rack tilted. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. The rack tipped forward. Metal training implements slid free gravity, converting potential energy to kinetic threat. 23 kilograms of metal and composite hurtling downward towards Scholar Oren, who was studying his datapad 3 meters away, completely unaware. Kira moved. 4 meters crossed in under a second. Her body reacted before her conscious mind registered the threat, 12 years of combat conditioning activating automatically. Neural pathways carved through repetition, ingrained reflex encoded at a level below thought. She caught 3 falling rods midair. The impacts rang against her palm. She had positioned her hands to absorb force without letting the metal contact bone. Her left hand simultaneously reached for Scholar Oren fingers, finding the pressure point on his shoulder that would make him step backward without conscious decision. He moved. The remaining equipment clattered to the padded floor around him, missing by centimeters. No injuries, no contact, no harm. Kira stood holding the 3 rods, breathing unchanged stance, balanced for additional movement if required. Her body was still in threat response mode, scanning for secondary dangers, calculating next actions. Then her conscious mind caught up, realized this was not combat, not an attack, an accident. She exhaled slowly, set the rods down carefully. Heads up, Scholar, she said, her voice casual despite the adrenaline flooding her system. These things are heavier than they look. The training hall had gone completely silent. Every recruit stared. Scholar Oren looked down at the equipment scattered around his feet, then up at Kira, then back down. His face went through several colors as he processed how close the impact had been. He started. I did not even see reflexes, Kira said simply. Spent a lot of time around falling objects. She offered him a small smile. You okay? He nodded, still processing. Instructor Granite's expression was unreadable. He looked at the fallen equipment, at Kira, at the distance she had covered, at the precision of the catch, at Scholar Vex unharmed. Everyone take 15 minutes, he said. Hydration break. As the recruits dispersed, murmuring among themselves, Granite approached Kira. His voice was low enough that only she could hear. That was not a choice, he said. That was automatic. Yes, Kira acknowledged. No point denying it. What if next time it is not falling equipment? The question hung between them like a blade. Then I hope, Kira said quietly, that I am still fast enough to choose the right response. Granite studied her for a long moment, then nodded once and walked away. From the observation deck, Jarrell watched her stand alone in the center of the training hall, staring at her hands. Her hands trembled, barely perceptible, only visible if you knew to look. She had saved someone without thinking. Her body had made the decision before her mind engaged. The question was whether that autonomy was a blessing or a curse, whether reflexes honed in war could be trusted in peace. That evening, Jarrell found Kira alone on the observation deck, overlooking the stellar vista beyond the station. She stood at the viewport, hands clasped behind her back, in a posture he recognized as military rest stance, watching the stars as if they held answers. I did not mean to intrude, he said. You are not, Kira replied without turning. I could not sleep. Jarrell moved to stand beside her, maintaining respectful distance. They watched the stars in silence for several moments. Nebula colors painted the darkness, blues and purples and golds, stellar nurseries where new suns burned into existence. The incident today, Jarrell said carefully, that was remarkable. Ingrained reflex, Kira said. Her voice was flat, emotionless in a way that suggested great control. It was more than that. You moved to protect without conscious thought, without hesitation. You saved Scholar Oren. I did what I was trained to do. Jarrell considered his next words carefully. This was delicate ground. May I ask what made you leave the military? You do not have to answer if it is too personal. Kira was silent for so long he thought she would decline. Then she spoke. Last year, that hostage rescue I mentioned in the meeting. Her voice was quiet. The 7-year-old girl with the shrapnel wound. The 19-year-old conscript with the gun. She paused. Jarrell waited, understanding she was circling something difficult. I had a fraction of a second to decide. Every tactical manual said neutralize the threat, but I looked at his eyes. Really looked. He was not a soldier. He was a terrified kid who did not want to be there. Kira's hands tightened behind her back. So I talked instead of shooting. The girl lived. The kid lowered his weapon. But my CO was right. Technically, I violated protocol, put the mission at risk. She turned to face Juro. Her eyes held something ancient and tired. That was when I realized I had spent 12 years making those calculations. Who lives, who dies, who gets neutralized. And I was good at it. Terrifyingly good. The decisions came automatically like breathing. That took more strength than the alternative, Jarrell said. Kira laughed hollow and brittle. Or less. I still do not know. But I realized something in that moment. I had spent 12 years making split-second decisions about who lives and who dies, hostage or hostile, civilian or combatant, threat or terrified, split-second decisions that determined whether someone went home or went into the ground. Her voice cracked slightly. And I was good at it. That is what scared me. I had become very, very good at making those calculations. Automatic, efficient, effective. I could look at a situation and know exactly who to shoot, where to shoot, how many rounds, optimal targeting sequence. It was as natural as breathing. And you did not want to be that person anymore, Jarrell said quietly. I did not want to be good at killing, Kira said. I wanted to be good at something else, anything else. I wanted to walk into a room and not automatically identify threats and calculate neutralization strategies. I wanted to see a scared person with a gun and think they need help instead of center mass 2 rounds. She turned to face him fully. The problem is training does not just turn off. Today when that equipment fell, I did not think Scholar Vex might get hurt. I thought trajectory, analysis, intercept, vector, threat, assessment, response protocol. Automatic, no conscious decision. My body moved before my brain finished processing what was happening. But you saved him. This time, yes, this time it was falling equipment and the correct response was to catch it and move him. But what if next time it is not? What if someone trips during a drill and bumps into me and my body interprets it as an attack? What if there is a loud noise and I react like I am under fire? What if my instincts override my intentions and I hurt someone because my reflexes are still calibrated for war? The fear in her voice was real, raw. This was what kept her awake at night, not the past, the future, the possibility that she could not escape what she had been trained to be. You have not hurt anyone yet, Jarrell said. Today, your instincts protected Scholar Vex. They did not attack. They saved. Today, Kira repeated. But tomorrow, next week, what happens when the situation is ambiguous and I have zero point 0.8 seconds to decide, and my training makes the choice for me? Jarrell considered his response carefully. This mattered, perhaps more than anything he had said in his entire career. You told me you spent years being the solution when things went wrong. Now you want to learn how to exist where things do not explode. Yes. Perhaps, Jarrell said slowly, you are not fighting your training. Perhaps you are refining it. Today your body moved automatically to protect. That is the same speed, the same capability. But the intent was different. Not to neutralize a threat, to prevent harm. He gestured toward the training hall below, where Group 12 would gather tomorrow. Petals was terrified of his own shadow 3 weeks ago. Now he holds training equipment without apologizing to it. The Quillics thought their size made them weak. Now they understand it makes them agile. You taught them that. Not through combat, through patience. They are good people, Kira said softly. They deserve to feel safe. So do you, Jarrell replied. You deserve to trust yourself, to believe that you can carry these skills into peacetime and use them to build instead of destroy. To know that speed and capability do not always lead to harm. Kira looked at him with something fragile in her expression. Hope, maybe, or the desire for hope. What if I am wrong? What if restraint has limits? Then Zarel said, we will face that together. But I do not believe you will be wrong, because you are here asking these questions afraid of becoming what you no longer want to be. That fear means you are still choosing, still in control. They stood in silence watching stars being born in the distant nebula. Creation from chaos, light from darkness, transformation as old as the universe itself. Thank you, Kira said finally, for trusting me enough to let me try. Thank you, Jarell replied, for being brave enough to want to change. Week 3 arrived with final examination announcements. Instructor Granite addressed Group 12 in the training hall, his massive form commanding attention without effort. You have progressed beyond initial expectations, he said. 3 weeks ago, most of you could not hold equipment without trembling. Now you move with awareness and confidence. The recruits exchanged glances, pride mixed with nervousness. Your final examination will not be a written test, Granite continued, but individual demonstrations. You will face a scenario as a team, environmental hazards, unexpected situations. Your objective: navigate safely, apply your training, emerge together. You will be evaluated on awareness, decision-making, and mutual support. Petals raised a trembling petal appendage. Will there be combat, instructor? There will be challenges, Granite replied. How you respond will determine your success. Trust your training, trust each other. Kira caught his eye from across the hall. A silent question. Do you want me to participate or observe? Granite's answering look was clear. Participate. If you cannot trust yourself in a controlled scenario, you will never trust yourself in the real world. She nodded, understanding. The final examination began at second cycle 1400 hours station time. The scenario was simple on paper: simulated structure, fire evacuation protocol, navigate to safety. The training hall had been reconfigured into a maze of corridors and rooms, smoke machines positioned to create obscured visibility, emergency lighting providing minimal illumination. Designed to be challenging but safe. Controlled stress without real danger. Group 12 entered it together, nervous but determined. The first 10 minutes proceeded according to plan. Smoke activated, non-toxic but thick enough to reduce visibility to 3 meters. Emergency lighting kicked in harsh red floods that painted everything in shades of blood and shadow. Simulated alarm klaxons wailed at carefully calibrated volumes loud enough to create urgency without triggering panic responses in sensitive species. Orange checked his datapad for evacuation routes. The Quillics scouted ahead using their small size to navigate gaps and report back. Petals maintained position in the center of the group, his bioluminescent petals providing additional light. Kira coordinated movement, her voice calm and clear over the noise. Stay low. Follow the emergency markers. Orin, what is our route? Corridor 3 to Junction 7, then east to emergency exit Delta, Orin called back. Quillic scout Corridor 3, check for obstructions. Clear, Skip's voice echoed back. No obstacles. They moved as a unit, practiced, confident. Then the electrical short occurred, not part of the simulation. Real fault in the training hall's power distribution system. Actual sparks. Actual smell of burning insulation. The emergency bulkheads began to close, safety protocol containing potential fire to prevent spread. The smoke became real. Grid. Thick. Temperature spiked as actual heat generated from actual electrical failure. Lights went fully dark. Emergency systems failed. Complete blackness except for petals fading bioluminescence. This is not the drill, someone shouted. Panic ignited faster than the electrical fire. I cannot see, Petals cried, his petals dimming further in stress. The doors are closing, Dash screamed. We are trapped. Oren's voice cracked. Kira felt it happen. The switch. Combat mode activating. Threat assessment running automatically. Calculating. Audio processing. Determining optimal response. Instinct said, grab nearest person. Break through bulkhead. Also get out. Survival priority. Training said neutralize threats, secure area, but extract personnel, mission success. But she chose differently. Group 12. Her voice cut through the panic like a blade. Not shouting. Command voice, the tone that had led teams through worse situations than this. Sound off, everyone, call your position. One by one they responded. Voices shaking but responding. She counted. All present. Petals. Kira said, her voice dropping back to calm certainty. Your petals glow. You are our light source. Lead us to the nearest exit. Everyone else eyes on Petals. Follow the light. I cannot, Petals stammered. Yes, you can, Kira said firmly. Remember the obstacle course. You did not think you could climb it, but you did. This is just another wall, and you have already proven you can climb walls. Light the way. Petals flickered, then brightened. Dim, but enough. A beacon in darkness. Quilix trio, Kira continued. The bulkhead is closing but not closed. You are small enough to squeeze under. Do it now. Find the manual override on the other side. Skip hesitated only a heartbeat, then dove forward. Dash followed. Flick went last. They disappeared under the descending barrier. Everyone else, Kira said, hand on the shoulder in front of you. Chain formation. We move together. Nobody gets left behind. They formed the line. Followed Petal's light. The bulkhead was at 40% open when Skip's voice echoed from the other side. Found the panel. It is locked. Emergency bypass, Kira called back. Red lever. Pull hard. A clang. The bulkhead stopped descending. It is stuck at 40%, Flick reported. That is enough, Kira said. Smallest first, sideways. Exhale. You have practiced tight spaces. This is just another course section. One by one they slid through. Petals froze at the gap, stress paralysis setting in. Kira could grab him, throw him through, ensure his safety in 0.3 seconds. Instead, she knelt beside him. Smoke thick, heat rising, time running out. But she chose patience. Petals, look at me. His eyes focused. You have already done the hardest thing. You lit the way when everyone was in darkness. This is easier than that. Just slide through and keep being our light on the other side. Will you come with me? Petals whispered. Right behind you, Kira promised. I will be the last one through. That is my job, to make sure everyone else makes it. Petals slid through the gap. Kira went last as promised, diving under the bulkhead as it resumed its descent, rolling clear as it sealed behind her with a final metallic clang. Group 12 stood in the corridor beyond, coughing, but whole. Station security was rushing toward them, alarms blaring, emergency teams mobilizing. All present, all accounted for. 0 casualties. 6 days later, they graduated. The ceremony was small but significant. Director Prism presided, her crystalline form refracting pride through the assembled crowd. Group 12 stood in formation, no longer the terrified civilians who had entered training 3 weeks ago. Achievements were announced. Petals transferred to station safety inspection, his attention to detail and newfound confidence, making him ideal for the role. The Quilix trio had already begun designing a self-defense program for smaller species, turning their perceived weakness into teachable advantage. Oren and Nix published their paper on cross-species threat response theory, citing Kira's methodology as revolutionary. When Kira's name was called, the announcement was different. Humanitarian Operations Specialist Diplomatic Corps, assignment training relief workers for crisis response in civilian contexts. She had found her path, teaching others what she had learned. That capability did not require cruelty. That strength could serve protection. That skills forged in war could be refined for peace. After the ceremony, Jarrell found her on the observation deck, full circle to where they had spoken weeks ago. You are staying with diplomatic work, he said. There is work to do, Kira replied, teaching others what they taught me. Which was? She smiled. That strength is not about what you can destroy. It is about what you choose to protect. That being dangerous and being kind are not opposites. That I can be both as long as I choose which one leads. Jarrell looked at the file still glowing on his datapad. Purple code, classification impossible. The algorithm still rates you as Tier 9 threat. It is not wrong, Kira said. I am dangerous, but I am also a teacher, a medic, a friend. I can be all of these things because I choose which one matters most. Below, Group 12 celebrated, visible through the viewport, Petals surrounded by congratulating colleagues, Quilix demonstrating moves to admirers, scholars discussing research with peers. They saw Kira and waved. She waved back. I keep your file on my desk now, Jarrell said. As a warning, as a reminder. Of what? That the most dangerous beings in the galaxy are the ones who choose kindness, not because they are weak, but because they know exactly what they are capable of and choose gentleness anyway. Kira turned to face him. Is that what you see when you look at me? No, Jarrell said. I see someone who spent 12 years being a weapon and chose to become something more. I see the hardest kind of strength, the strength to change. She nodded slowly, accepting the words. And sometimes, Jarrell continued, the worst paperwork errors lead to the best outcomes. You just have to be brave enough not to fix them too quickly. The stars burned beyond the viewport. Constant, ancient, Witnesses to transformation across eons. Kira Vex stood among them, no longer only a soldier, not quite fully civilian, but something new. Something the galaxy needed even if its algorithms could not classify it. Proof that capability and compassion could coexist. That the choice between predator and protector was made fresh every day. That the kindest weapons were the ones that chose never to fire. The purple code remained in the system. Impossible to categorize. Impossible to resolve. Perfect.